Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today for the launch of the resource. I'm really excited to share it with everyone. I guess putting this together has been a bit of a labor of love, and I hope you can all find something useful to help tell queer stories in your heritage spaces. Before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to write the toolkit. So for a visual description or a bit about me, so I'm a queer white Australian woman. I have brown hair with a fringe, bangs. I'm wearing a green top today, and I have a nose ring. I've been working in the heritage sector here in the UK for the past maybe 5 years, but I started my career back home in Australia. And this starting point has really shaped my approach to engagement and storytelling. My early work in historic houses in Sydney focused on what was called contact histories. So I'll share this slide as well. So for anyone who doesn't know, contact histories refers to kind of working class British people often caught up in the criminal justice system during the late 18th or early 19th centuries. They're more commonly known as convicts and their relationship with First Nation Australians. So these two groups whose stories, if recorded at all, are often done so through very kind of narrow institutional lenses. But they're really central to understanding Australia's history. And so the experience of navigating these histories in heritage sites, such as here at Hyde Park Barracks, so it's an early 19th century kind of sleeping accommodation or compound for male convicts in Sydney. This has really shaped the way that I work. It's an ingrained part of my practice to look for ways to tell intangible stories through objects and physical spaces. In Australia, it's really something you can't avoid. You can't avoid these complex histories, and you have to find creative ways to engage with them. In the UK, I have found that there's been a bit of a different approach with so many objects and preserved spaces available. I found there's not as much urgency to engage with things that are less visible. But for me, a lack of kind of physical evidence isn't really a good enough reason to sideline a story, especially when that story can tell a deeper, more enriched view of the past, such is the case for queer history. And I guess as a queer woman myself, I know what it's like to walk into a gallery or a museum and not see myself. I know what it's like to hear, we have always been here, and wonder where here actually is, because I couldn't find it in the place that I thought it was supposed to hold our stories, like a museum. So thankfully, we've moved forward, or we're starting to move forward, and I've spent the majority of my life, my working life, kind of in historic houses, and historic sites. So from convict barracks in Sydney to castles in rural Scotland, and all of them have had queer stories. And my work, I guess, is about finding and sharing them. So I've designed this toolkit to help others connect queer stories to their sites and collections, even when there are no clear queer links. So today I'll be walking you through what the resource is all about, how it can help you, and who benefits from it. We'll explore the case study that's included in a little more detail so you can get an idea of what it looks like in practice, and I'll share some of the outcomes as well. All right. So what is the resource for? So How to Queer Your Historic House is a practical step-by-step guide that is designed to support heritage professionals uncover, link, and tell queer stories through the collections and spaces within their property and sites. So the guide is shaped by my own practice, working in visitor services teams for both national and local heritage organisations between Australia and Scotland. It draws on my experience navigating and negotiating various institutional perceptions and positionings. And I guess I've put on the screen here my biggest piece of advice for doing this work or telling queer stories in historic houses is to embrace the messy process of disrupting established narratives, investigate every ping in your gaydar, and trust the process. And the resource advocates for, so the resource itself, it really advocates for a focus on context. So instead of looking only for direct evidence of queer lives at your site, the toolkit encourages you to explore the broader social and cultural landscape of a site's time and place. That's often where the queer stories begin to emerge. And it's designed to help staff, volunteers, communities, and visitors rethink and reorient the traditional narratives that are tied to objects and spaces, offering a clear framework to engage with queer histories, even when there are no obvious queer links. And so it supports a richer, more inclusive approach, reflective of the diverse communities who visit historic houses and the kind of world we live in today. So it aims to affirm the presence of queer people in the past in ways that connect meaningfully with queer identities today. And the toolkit helps heritage sites grow their audiences. By telling more inclusive stories, sites become more relevant, they become more accessible, bringing more people through the doors and ultimately supporting long-term sustainability through stronger visitor and community engagement, numbers, and income. So, why is it useful? The toolkit is useful because it offers ways to embrace gaps in the historical record, which are especially common in queer histories. So instead of seeing silence as a problem to solve, the toolkit invites you to treat it as meaningful. So absences, erasures, and silences are part of the queer story, and acknowledging them can open up new ways of interpreting the past. It also encourages new ways of seeing. So especially around how history has been shaped by class, race, gender, and other lived experiences. Queer history is not a single narrative. The toolkit supports an intersectional approach that reflects the complexity and diversity of queer lives in the past and today. So it also encourages or offers ways to situate the site within the wider community. So historic houses are not isolated, they're part of local landscapes and communities, and the toolkit encourages linking the site to broader queer stories in the area. In doing so, the property becomes a platform for community memory, and it offers visitors a richer understanding of its place within society at the time as well, or in the society of today. It also offers ways to reimagine subcultures or hidden lives, especially those that existed outside of official narratives. Rather than searching for clear-cut identities, the focus is on the social worlds, the kind of coded behaviors, and the quiet networks that made queer lives possible, even in restrictive contexts. It really looks to highlight overlooked objects as well. From furniture to paintings, everyday material culture can hold queer significance. Sometimes this is coded, sometimes it's retroactive, and other times the object is just acting as a launching pad or a visual tool for a wider story about queerness at the time period. So the toolkit helps identify these possibilities and offers ways to interpret them with a bit of care and a lot of creativity. And lastly, the toolkit is to help you reframe queer histories, not as hidden or obscure, but as an integral part to understanding the broader social and cultural dynamics of the period. Who is it for? So the toolkit is mostly for heritage professionals who work closely with collections and the public. So it's designed for engagement teams like visitor services staff, education and program delivery teams, collection care staff and volunteers. It's also for curators, researchers and community groups. The idea is for everyone to work together with the house and the collection to uncover and share queer stories. But it's not just for historic houses and places. Galleries and museums can also benefit if they want to create queer object trails or explore connections for exhibition research. Basically, it's just all about creating new links between objects, people, and places. And an important part for me to get across is that the resource is really grassroots. It advocates and supports a ground-up approach. Because in my experience, this is how change happens. The kind of people who work the closest with the communities or the visitors, the ones who tell the stories and make those connections, can help to make change that kind of ripples up, I guess. But everyone needs to be there to support each other to make that happen. With this in mind, so with this kind of grassroots approach in mind, the toolkit is designed to be budget friendly. This is to make it accessible for everybody working in the heritage sector. So you don't need to spend much to get started. You can work with the resources you already have. So a collection, a site, mixed with an open mind and the internet. There are plenty of online resources that are out there now to draw on. And with that, you can confidently and creatively bring a new context to the everyday objects and spaces within a historic house. More broadly, the resource is for the queer community and anyone interested in how intangible or marginalized histories can deepen our understanding of the past. Sometimes queer histories can feel a bit removed from wider narratives, but queer people have always been connected to social networks and to physical places, and have been part of the broader social and cultural context in which a heritage site exists. So the toolkit, I've got this in bold. So the toolkit is always about understanding the role that queer stories have played in shaping historical moments and movements in big and small ways, and making your historic house or heritage site a place where these stories can be shared. So overall, it's a way to expand the line, we have always been here, to say that we have always been part of this community and part of the history of this place. Now, let's talk about how the toolkit actually works in practice, how to apply it, what's included, and how it can support your work. So most importantly, the toolkit advocates for a process that is playful and experimental, a little messy and collaborative. It's designed to spark creativity and encourage you to try new approaches, because queer histories often thrive in spaces of flexibility and experimentation. It's not meant to be a rigid guide, but rather an invitation to play with ideas, see what resonates with your own collection and context. And if you take anything away from today, please let it be that. So with playfulness in mind, I know that it's good to have something that's very practical, gives you clear instructions. So the toolkit is organized into sections, allowing you to skip forward or back as needed. It's designed to be flexible and to help you navigate through challenges you may face when working with queer histories. The biggest one that starts off the toolkit is kind of facing the but no one queer lived here, and so we get straight into how to navigate that particular challenge, with other ones like gaps in the record and things like that coming afterwards as well. Next point is that it offers a step-by-step guide for finding links. So I always recommend starting wide, looking at general queer histories from the time period and location, and then working towards the specific. If you're branching off from a person or object that you think might be queer, this is still the case. Start with the wide queer context and then work back in towards the object or the story or the person. To inspire you and give you something concrete to work with, the toolkit includes a case study. So this helps ground the theory in a real-world example, offering a practical demonstration of how the research and interpretation process can be applied. So as someone who's kind of worked front of house, visitor services, engagement, events, I understand that when you work at the property, everything is very practical. It's very how will this actually work when I do it in person with the members of the public in front of me, rather than kind of an idea that exists in an email or kind of a bit obscure. And so I've tried to make it using my experience to try and make it as practical as possible. Hence why the case study is there. And I've also included live links in the toolkit. So these relate to the stories told at the case study, but they're also there to give you a bit of an idea of where to find queer stories on the internet as well. So I think one of them links off to the National Archives. There's a few other websites as well to check out, to kind of be like, this is the information that's out there. This is what other people are doing to tell queer stories. And there's also at the end, I'll come back to it in a second, but there's a reading list, and I've tried to prioritize online resources that are free to access, so that you can kind of jump right in. And again, you're not getting bogged down in kind of paywalls or academic language. It's really there to be as practical as possible. So that's why there's live links as well. I love a live link. It also offers some interpretation tips, so rejecting the kind of straight until proven gay mind frame that people can kind of fall into, including myself, and encourages you to pay attention to the fine details of a story. So you can link it to the objects and themes within your collection. The toolkit provides steps for applying your research to everyday practice at your site as well. So this includes having open communication with all your staff and volunteers, hosting inclusivity training, creating public programs and history trails, and making research notes that are both comprehensive and dynamic. So they can be integrated into general kind of guiding notes for your property or for volunteers, or adapted and connected to other projects like exhibitions. So the toolkit emphasizes the importance of evaluating your work as well. Collecting data helps support the impact of your work and assist in securing future funding. So for example, a kind of real world example, the queer history trail that I created for the Georgian House, which is the case study included, the trail started off as a Microsoft Word document that was just landscape A4 folded in 3. And I would just print week after week, carefully tracking how many reprints were needed. And that persistence really paid off as the data helped secure funding to have the trail professionally printed after a year of reprinting on the printer and basically breaking the printer. But that's a great example of how like persistence and keeping records can really help you show the people who have the money to pay for things to be printed, that the public are interested and this is something that they want. So lastly, the toolkit draws on the work of many, many others. And so I've included a reading list, mostly made up of free to access online resources that can provide a more in-depth knowledge and inspiration for you and help you find stories too. All right, so we're just going to dive straight into the case study because I feel like this is what really helps bring the theory to life. So to help you through the steps, I've included a case study based on my own practice at the Georgian House. It's a 1790s neoclassical townhouse located in Edinburgh's World Heritage listed Newtown. So I want to be super honest here. This was a self-appointed project that I gave myself 3 years ago, and all I had was the collection on display, my lived experience, and the internet, and my A4 Microsoft Word document. And I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could find one queer story for each room. My point being that I didn't have a budget and I was really relying mostly on the research into queer history and queer people that was already out there. So again, this resource, I've got this in bold as well, this resource isn't really about discovering new queer people in the past. It's more focused on helping you connect them to your heritage site. And also I want to make it clear that, to my knowledge, the Georgian House has no known queer residents or direct links to queer history. It's all in the context. I just use the objects and spaces within the house as markers through which to turn my research of wider queer stories in Edinburgh from the time period into stories and scenes that could be reimagined within the historic house. So I'll take you through the process with a few examples. So let's get into it. Right, so step one is to frame the queer context of your site. So looking at the time period of the house. So the Georgian house was built in 1796 during the Scottish Enlightenment. This is a time when ideas about the individual began to emerge, with primary sources revealing a shift in understanding sexuality in its really, really early days. So going from something that you did to something that you were. Second is looking at the location of the site. So the Georgian house is an inner city townhouse in a wealthy part of Scotland's capital city. And it's close to the second largest port, or what was the second largest port in Scotland. These all impact the type of queer histories that emerge. So they tend to revolve around themes like social privilege, trade, and cultural trends. And the third thing is looking at the sources and the stories through an intersectional lens. So the Georgian house follows a comparative kind of upstairs, downstairs model. This is a pretty common interpretation method used in historic houses. And this was used to explore how wealth and class shaped queer visibility in the 18th century. For example, the elite living upstairs had greater privilege and autonomy, allowing for more freedom of expression, although this was still discreet. In contrast, working class individuals downstairs are mostly found in legal records rather than personal accounts, highlighting how class influenced both the expression and preservation of queer experiences. Step two. So step two is about identifying how objects in your collection can connect to these wider stories. And I want to give you 3 examples from the toolkit. All right, so the first is this engraving in the Georgian house bedroom. So this was the object that sparked the whole project, and it lives rent-free in my head. It is Jupiter disguised as Diana seducing the huntress, the Callisto. And it's an engraving based on a painting by Angelica Kaufman. So just for a visual description, the scene depicts 2 women with their bow and arrows sitting under a tree embracing. There's a cherub to their left, partially hidden behind a bush, who has his finger over his lips, as if indicating to the sitters to be quiet or to keep their embrace a secret. At Diana's feet is an eagle, which signals to the viewer that Diana is actually Jupiter in disguise. So this object is used to explore cultural trends and the revival of classical themes during Edinburgh's Enlightenment period. It draws attention to the queerness embedded in classical mythology, a tradition which is rich in narratives of same-sex desire, divine transformations, and fluid gender expression. It's kept relevant to the Georgian period, to the 18th century, the period of the house, by explaining that in 18th century Edinburgh, individuals engaged with classical art and literature, not just for aesthetic or scholarly reasons, it was very trendy during the Georgian period, but also as a coded language through which queerness could be expressed, explored, or even concealed. And as the engraving is in the bedroom, there's also room for an easy kind of transition into talking about queer women who effectively kind of flew under the radar, as romantic friendships were a fashionable and acceptable form of intimacy between women at the time as well. We have an interesting story with this object in particular as well, because this specific object was actually incorrectly titled Classical Scene with Sappho in our visitor information. So we also kind of use this to segue into the history of Sappho and the term sapphic, which was first used to describe women who loved women in the 18th century. Next object, the second object I'm sharing with you is the globe in the Georgian house parlor. So for a visual description, the globe is illustrated with the outlines of countries and continents from around 1810 when it was made. It is part of a pair. The other globe depicts the stars. Both globes are mounted on a mahogany stand for easy viewing and kind of interaction in the round. So the globe is used to compare and contrast global and local attitudes towards gender and sexuality. It also serves as a gateway to exploring cultural exchange and the ways power and politics shaped and often controlled expressions of queer identities and actions across different parts of the world. So this is something that is from the 18th century, but also resonates with queer people today as well. So some examples that are touched on at the Georgian House are France decriminalizing homosexuality as part of the Penal Code in 1791, convictions and executions in colonial Australia for the crime of sodomy. Obviously had to insert Australia into Australian history in there any way I could. And also looking at Hijra communities in Southern Asia, kind of pre and post British occupation as well. The globe is also explored through the context of the room. So the parlour is the room at the Georgian House for learning and leisure. So we discuss how access to information about queer behaviours and queer identities during the period kind of shaped attitudes towards it as well. And the final object that I'll share with you is the spice box in the Georgian House kitchen. So this is a simple black metal box with 6 removable compartments for ginger, cinnamon, mace, cloves, allspice, and nutmeg. And this object is used to invite reflection on Scotland's role in the British Empire, where extensive trade and travel networks created opportunities for social ambiguity, reinvention, and cultural exchange. At the Georgian House, it's used as a tool for talking about polari, so the coded language spoken between men seeking intimacy with other men. And although it was a language that was more common in the mid-20th century, its origins come from the merchant navy in the 18th century. So the people who are moving the spices kind of from place to place through trade. And it's a language, so Polari is a language that's made up of French, Yiddish, Italian, Romani, and Cockney rhyming slang. So it's a real reflection of the variety of people who spoke it and where it was used. And it would have made its way to Edinburgh via the docks of the east coast of the UK. This particular spice box as well originates from Japan. So there is room here also to talk about Japan's Edo period. On the Georgian House kind of queer history tours, it's linked to a large scroll from Tokyo, or that depicts Tokyo, that is held at the Edinburgh City Council. And the scroll depicts a street scene from the 18th century, and it's used to talk about kind of cross-dressing in theatre and also sex work. So step 3, so there's, we've got our 3 steps and we're on to the last one. So step 3, the final one in the case study, is looking at the social networks of your property's residents. So encourages you to research if there are any known queer people who are connected to the house, either directly or indirectly, and see if you can find ways to bring their stories to life in the spaces at your site. So there are 2 examples in the toolkit. They are Dr. James Barry, who lived most of his life as a man, and my problematic fave, Anne Lister. So I'm going to talk to you about Anne here, and you'll have to check out the toolkit to find out more about James. So this painting is of St. Bernard's Well and the Water of Leith in the Georgian House drawing room, and it serves as a visual reference point for the story of Sibylla MacLean and Anne Lister. So the 2 women became lovers during a Lister's tour of Scotland in 1828. Lister recorded passing St. Bernard's Well in her carriage in a diary entry, along with several other landmarks around Edinburgh's new town. And this actually also includes visiting St. George's Church in Charlotte Square, where the Georgian House is located. And in typical Anne Lister style, she didn't have many nice things to say about the church, very classic Anne, always wants to have her opinion heard. And I think the painting's location in the Georgian House drawing room as well kind of helps to reimagine the new townhouse, which is just a street over from our museum, or from the Georgian House Museum, where we know that the couple stayed, they socialized, they had sex, situating their story in a room just like this one. Oh, and this is what the Georgian house drawing room looks like. So we tell this story and be like, you know, the house that they stayed in has more or less the same kind of interior layout in terms of the rooms. It looks the same on the outside as well, because all the buildings look the same in the new town. And so we can imagine that this is the room. It would have looked something like this. And you can, if you look out the window here as well, you can see St. George's Church. So we kind of talk about Anne's, or we quote Anne on like what she thought about the building as well. So the last part of the toolkit talks about the application process. So how to integrate your research and interpretations into the everyday runnings of your site. And just to stick with the Georgian house, I've used examples of how the theory has played out in real life at the Georgian house. So over the past 3 years, since I started this work, the Georgian house has seen the volunteer type diversify, and the average age of the volunteers has dropped. The research is continuously being integrated into guiding notes given to new volunteers, starting the process of queer history being a standard part of storytelling at the property. A history trail has been created from the research. You can see it on the screen here. And there are queer history tours for community groups and the general public. The house has hosted external speakers and walking tours. So on the screen here, you can see a group standing outside the house that Anne Lister and Sabella McLean stayed in while visiting Edinburgh. The Georgian house has also hosted, Georgian House also hosted a queer ball for Pride last year, where ticket holders learned 18th century dance routines and dressed up. And we've had exhibition interventions. So as part of the exhibition, the Georgian House hosted in 2023 about the portrait artist Henry Raeburn. I did a talk called Raeburn's Edinburgh Queered, which explored the queer links in the exhibition. And about half the portraits included in the exhibition had some kind of queer link that could be uncovered. Right. So the story of, just to continue as well, other things that have kind of come about from this work, from the toolkit, is that the story of two Edinburgh school teachers, which you'll find briefly mentioned in the toolkit, along with Dr. James Barry and Anne and Sabella's visit to Charlotte Square, have all been added to the Georgian House timeline. So this is something that's kind of on big print on the wall in the entrance hall. So it's the first thing visitors see when they enter the house and come up to the admissions desk. So you can see I've tried to kind of box in pink 2 of the timeline kind of inserts, I guess. So it's all kind of being really integrated into the story of the house and the overview of the Georgian period in Edinburgh's new town. We've also started, or the method has kind of started to branch out. So another historic house on Edinburgh's Royal Mile, Gladstone's Land, hosted a talk about these 2 Edinburgh school teachers and their story that I just mentioned, as it's a story that's connected to both heritage sites. So that's Gladstone's Land on the screen. You can see there, it's the middle house, and it's one of the oldest houses on the Royal Mile. And so it's all these kind of activities that have brought in new audiences to the Georgian House, and their success has kind of boosted the confidence of everyone, from curators to volunteers, to talk about Edinburgh's queer history. It's kind of given us the confidence to know that these events, they sell out, they make money, and people are really interested and they want to know more. So we keep churning them out. And so I think most importantly for me, the method, apart from all of these amazing things that have kind of come out of it and really getting the positive feedback that we need to move forward, I think most importantly for me, the method in the toolkit has opened up a more nuanced understanding of relationships in the past, and encouraged more creativity about how to share stories with the local community. So I really like talking about this object as well. So this is a copy of Catherine Talbot's complete works from the Georgian House parlour bookcase. So Catherine Talbot was an early member of the Blue Stocking Society, and had a close relationship with another member, Elizabeth Carter. So just to quote them, so Elizabeth wrote to Catherine, she is my absolute passion. I think of her all day and dream of her all night, and one way or another introduce her into every subject I talk of. And Catherine reciprocated these feelings by sending Elizabeth a lock of her hair. And she later teased that Elizabeth had fallen in love with another woman and the first forgot. So neither married, and when Catherine died, she left her writing to Elizabeth, who published them at her own expense. And this edition of the book is a legacy of their story. Of course, we can't know for sure, but this gives us an indication of kind of the love that they shared for one another. There's a lot of kind of playful flirting and teasing and kind of mentioning Elizabeth kind of falling in and out in love with lots of women. And so, yeah, this edition of the book is a legacy to their story. And it was hidden in plain sight in the Georgian House parlor bookcase for what must have been decades. And we only kind of picked it out last year. And this story has inspired the Georgian House to host a book festival for Pride this June, with stalls from local booksellers, the National Library of Scotland, and Scotland's first queer bookshop, Lavender Menace, which is now a community archive. So they'll all be kind of taking up a little stand at the Georgian House. And this event will hopefully again draw in new audiences and put the Georgian House on the queer literary map, I guess. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to do it again next year. I think we've sold maybe 120 tickets. So really great turnout for like a first try at something like this. Right, and more broadly, the method used in the toolkit has started to make its way into other parts of the sector. So I've got a public talk coming up at the Scottish National Galleries, where I'll be exploring one of their long-standing exhibitions called Scots in Italy, looking at some of the sitters and context through a queer lens. And I'll also be delivering a knowledge sharing session internally for their staff, where I'll be chatting about how the toolkit's methods can be used to develop interpretation and community engagement. And of course, Osterley Park are getting involved. So after the break, they are going to speak to you a bit more about their collection, research, and journey with the toolkit. And I believe James Byers is also going to make an appearance in their presentation as well. And yeah, so I just wanted to finish by saying that this toolkit and my queer history projects in general wouldn't have been possible on my own. It really does take a community and also organizational and individual allies within them to support, platform, and also really defend the place of queer history in public museums, galleries, and heritage sites. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Cesare for all the support and enthusiasm. And Margaret as well, who I know is somewhere on the call, for their design eye, because the toolkit wouldn't have been possible without both of you. And also to thank Osterley Park for coming on board when it was just an idea. Poor Matt, who I think you're going to hear from in a second as well. I basically like cold called him and was like, I've got this idea. What do you think? And he just jumped on board. So really, really thankful for that as well. And lastly, on the screen here, I've just popped up my website. So this is where you can download the toolkit and explore more of my work and who I've worked with. And thank you.
Okay, well, I think it's me up first, so I'll start. So hello, everybody. I am Judith O'Flynn. I am the Senior Collections and House Officer at Osterley Park and House. I am currently sat in the top office of said house in Middlesex. I am 38 years old. My pronouns are she, her. And today I have lovely long brown hair, freshly dyed, I might add, to hide the greys. And I am wearing my favourite off-white shirt with jazzy cats. So that gives you some insight into what I'm like. The cats are blues, oranges and black. So I am a cat person as well as a dog person. So there's some insight into me. And I am going to be presenting today. I'm going to be giving you a bit of an overview and context about Osterley House and its history. And then you'll be hearing from Matt and Alice as well, and a bit more use about how we've been using the toolkit. I will let them introduce themselves as well, and then we can get started.
Oh, well, thank you, Judith. Matt, is it all right? Shall I go first? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Alice.
Can you hear me? Oh, lovely. Oh, well, morning, everyone. My name's Alice Strickland, and I'm a National Trust curator, and I'm sat at home, and it's pretty sunny. So, like Cesare, I've been having problems with the light, so hopefully everyone can see me. But more importantly, that you'll be able to see beautiful Osterley and the amazing interiors that we're going to be looking at today. So, I work across the portfolio of properties with my brilliant colleagues like Judith and Matt. At Osterley. So I'm going to be looking at some of the collection objects that we'd like to highlight using Indigo's fantastic toolkit that I've learned so much about just from this morning's presentation. So that's enough about me anyway.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name's Matt Butler. I'm the Programming and Partnerships Officer at Osterley. My pronouns are he/him. I'm 33 years old, a man, and I'm sitting in my room at home, although I have taken some of Osterley home with me. You may have noticed I've got a picture of the Thames behind me. That was from an old exhibition at Osterley that was going to go in the skip, so I saved it and brought it home. Yeah, it's been great coming along on this journey for the toolkit with Indigo. Very glad that she reached out. And yeah, looking forward to figuring out how we can use it in future to inform some of the programming at Osterley. That's me.
Lovely. Well, I think it's me who is getting this show on the road, so I will start giving you a bit of background about Osterley. Hopefully you can all see a rather beautiful slide on your screen. This is actually the back of Osterley House. We are a house of many fronts. We have our imposing front with the portico, and then we have our beautiful, sweeping, more artistic front at the back, which, as you can see from the slide, has the glorious meadow behind it. So to give you a bit of idea, we are essentially what you see today is the 18th century manor house situated in 360 acres of beautiful and designed parkland, which has been saved for the nation thanks to the family who gave it to the National Trust in 1949. The building is a Robert Adam building, both exterior and interior, and we are very blessed in the fact that so much of the 18th century interior survives that this makes us one of the most complete Robert Adam buildings in the country. However, I am going to give you a bit of context to the fact that Osterley actually has older roots. So we know from the lovely Domesday book that there has always been a manor farm on this site. And we know that it was also then later purchased by a rather famous gentleman, Sir Thomas Gresham, and he built the first true manor house on this site. And he actually had 600 acres around him at the time. He founded one of the first English paper mills here, established a heronry, and he created what was meant to be a really very, very large starter home for his son. Unfortunately, things don't always go to plan. Isn't that true of things today? And his son predeceased him, and they ended up selling Osterley on. And it has a really interesting life because it passes through multiple pairs of hands. So unlike a lot of manor houses, Osterley doesn't have one family that stays with it the whole way through. And as such, a lot of things get messed around with. So architecturally, it's quite an interesting building. And eventually it comes to a man called Nicholas Barban, who I like to describe as a little bit of a wheeler dealer in the Stuart period. He goes from having absolutely no money to vast quantities, and then he rapidly loses it all again. And it's the point where he comes to owning Osterley is when he's managed to amass a rather large fortune off the back of rebuilding the cheaper parts of London after the Great Fire. He also is one of the co-creators of fire insurance, which gives you a little bit of idea about how he was exploiting what had happened. And he ends up amassing this vast fortune of money and decides that he needs a house and a home that reflects his newfound status. And so he buys the rather dilapidated manor of Osterley. And he begins work on the broken down Tudor courtyard building that's here. And of course, as I said, he is not very good at money management and he rapidly runs out of money. Now, he had taken out a mortgage on top of everything in order to purchase this land and this house. And the mortgage was held with several earls, but also the Child Bank. And this is where Osterley's story really sort of kicks in for us and the building that you see in front of you on the screen. And it is Francis the Elder, Francis Child the Elder, who is the gentleman in question who ends up rather begrudgingly taking on ownership of this house in its dilapidated state. And he takes it on as a payment as default essentially on the mortgage that is held with his bank. And he's a particularly interesting man. He is a goldsmith turned banker, has been building this huge fortune. He is beginning to get links in with trade and the early beginnings of the East India Company. He's Lord Mayor of London. He is building his family's reputation. He's still what is deemed as quite new money in the 18th century. And he is amassing a vast collection of artwork, including one of the pieces that was highlighted with the toolkit, which is the Rubens, the glorification of the Duke of Buckingham, which sits proud right at the top of our grand staircase, or a copy of it does. And he brings all this collection together, and he takes on Osterley and he's not really sure what to do with it. And eventually he realizes that he's going to pass it on to his grandsons, who are the first in the Child family to be gentlemen from birth to death. There's no working their way up the ladder. They've made it. They are now one of the richest families in the country. And they sort of take on this house, and it's Francis the Younger who first gets it. And I think his initial reaction is, well, this won't do. This is not going to announce my status. It's not going to showcase my family. And he is the one that commissions Robert Adam in 1761, initially just to redesign the exterior of this building. But what I find particularly fascinating is they don't give Adam carte blanche to completely knock it down. They want to subsume the Tudor structure within the 18th century building. And our theory is this is because it was Thomas Gresham's house. And being a banking family, you can't get a better link than to the founding father of the Royal Exchange. So Thomas Gresham was a big name in the financial world. So you could imagine they wanted to keep that little bit of connection there. So they commission this amazing house, and it's supposed to be a party palace. They want it for entertaining clients, family, friends. They want it to be both imposing and powerful, but also a tranquil space that they can get out of London and enjoy. And this is very much what Adam creates. Unfortunately, Francis the Younger never gets to enjoy the fruits of his labour. He passes away very quickly, apparently on the eve of his wedding, but that's a whole other story. And it passes to his younger brother, Robert Child. And it is Robert Child who then commissions Adam to design the interiors as well. And he spares no expense. Pretty much every room at Osterley has a touch of Robert Adams' design within it, whether it be mirrors and furniture or the entire interior plasterwork sealing the works. It is the epitome of Adams' total design. And one of the key things that drew them to Adam's neoclassical style was the fact that they wanted to give the impression that they were well educated, that they were fashionable, but also to give this impression they'd been on the grand tour, which is a big part of Osterley's story. So that influence, and this is where we get a lot of connection. So we have this amazing Adam house with fabulous interiors, all influenced by the grand tour, the neoclassical design, coupled with a whole load of amazing chinoiserie that's coming through the East India Company. So thinking about Indigo talking about earlier about the connections with the spice box tea, we've got a lot of bits of collection like that throughout the house as well. So not only do we have this amazing sort of links with money men and how they made the money through goldsmithing, East India Company, but we then have this fantastic inspiration of the grand tour through Robert Adams' design. And it's literally, you cannot miss it. It's everywhere. We've got these beautiful inset paintings that have been designed and inspired by the classics. So there's so many things that could apply. And so that's sort of how Osterley comes to be. In 1782, the project takes 20 years to turn it into this amazing house. Sadly, Robert Child goes and dies the same year it's complete. But the house then passes through the family. It actually goes down the female line, which is really interesting. This is largely due to we have an eloping heiress in our history, which is fabulous, scandalous elopement in 1782. And so Robert Child actually disinherited his daughter and his grandson, and it ends up going to his eldest granddaughter. And it's through her she marries into the Jersey family. And they're the ones that keep the house on. They don't use it as a permanent residence. It is, again, either a summer house or used for periods of time throughout the year. And it's largely thanks to that the house remains intact. And when I say intact, if you ever get the chance to come down and see our beautiful tapestry room, the colours will blow you away. And considering they are 300 years old, if I still look that good in 300 years, I will be proud. It is absolutely stunning. And they continue to use the house for various things, but mostly parties, entertaining. That seems to be at the heart of what Osterley is. Thank you, Alice, for our lovely front of the house there, the portico. And this is very much sort of what Osterley continues to survive through, because it is this amazing party palace and it can be used for so many things. And eventually the Jersey family get to the sort of 1930s, and it's starting to become a bit of an expensive extra home. And they are really keen that it doesn't get lost as the urban area is starting to encroach around us. We are in Middlesex. We are literally now have Heathrow on our doorstep, the M4 behind us, the A4 on the other side. Civilization is creeping in. And the Jersey family, who have now married in and are owners of Osterley, were determined that the green space and this property would not be lost. So they started to try and open it up to the public themselves. We have records of them doing set days in 1939, and they get involved with the Georgian Society and try and look at ways of preserving this amazing building and keeping it for the nation. And then, of course, we all know that the Second World War kicks in, which kind of derailed their plans somewhat. And it was after that, having got the house and collection had survived, few near misses. We've got a couple of bomb craters on site. And we also saw the founding of the Home Guard here at Osterley. They get all the way through that, and they decide that they want to give it to the National Trust in 1949 so that it can be preserved for the nation. And one of the key stipulations by the 9th Earl of Jersey was that Parkland remain open to the public and free of charge. And we honour that even today. So we are one of the biggest green spaces in our local area. And we are able to say that we have the complete collection. They gave the entire collection of Adam furniture over with the house. About the only thing they did take with them was the collection of paintings. So unfortunately, we have lost some of those amazing works that were collected by Francis Child the Elder. However, the house is looking fantastic. And we are now looking at getting some new artwork on the walls. One of the biggest things that has happened in recent years is we were gifted through the Ford family, their grand tour collection of artwork, which was collected by Sir Brinsley Ford. Alice will be telling you more about that. And this grand tour collection features amazing drawings and paintings, all by tourists and people who are on the tour, but also artists. And there's a lot of stories there. And in fact, the toolkit, there's some particular items in this collection that's now based at Osterley that are particularly poignant. So I'll let Alice tell you more about that. But hopefully that was roughly about a 5-minute synopsis, whirlwind tour of Osterley's history.
Brilliant, Judith. Did you want just have a quick look through some of those rooms together, just to give people an idea? Sorry, because I'm driving the slides, aren't I? So that kind of
my glamorous assistant, yes. So this is the eating room. This is one of the first rooms that was designed by Adam as one of his earlier rooms, and you can see in here it's beautiful colours. It's kind of a pale pink and green with a very vibrant, striking red carpet. Beautiful lyre-back chairs with red leather covering. All of the furnishings in this room are either plaster or wood, very few soft furnishings, as this was the room you would have eaten your meals in. So the idea is that you wouldn't have any unpleasant smells trapped in the room. You can just about make out there's a rather lovely mosaic sideboard to one side there. There is also a bespoke design sideboard in this room by Robert Adam. These would have been bedecked with silver, and we do still have a large silver collection here at Austin, including a ginormous wine cistern that takes like 6 people to shift. And this would have been the room. The whole room would have been sumptuous and glittery. And then on the slides coming up, there's the tapestry room that I spoke about earlier. Those are French tapestries. They were woven at the Gobelins factory. They date from 1772. The date is on the tapestry itself. And they are beautiful, intense red. In the foreground, we've got lots of flowers and birds. This was actually said to be a stylistic choice by Mrs. Child herself. She had a menagerie on site here at Osterley, so they imported lots of exotic birds and animals, and she asked to have them included in the design. So there's a porcupine in there, parakeets, white raven, there's a badger. Apparently that's very exotic. And we've also got some swifts and swallows flying around, as well as a few nods to the family pets. So there's a white rabbit with a bow, 2 slightly squashed looking King Charles Cavalier Spaniels, and there's also meant to be Mrs. Child's gardening hat on the tapestry side as well, which I think is on the sort of left-hand side. And again, you can then see Robert Adams' beautiful ceiling in sort of pale turquoisey blue with purple and pink highlights, and that design is mirrored in the carpet. That is the original carpet. We are very blessed with original textiles, and this is epitome of Adams' total design: floor and ceiling mirroring. It's quite an intense room. It would have been a private drawing room. And then next to it is our actual drawing room. Again, this carpet has to be one of my favourite items. It's absolutely gorgeous and huge. It mirrors the ceiling, which is based on, or was based on, the Temple of Palmyra. So sunbursts on the ceiling. And actually in here on the beautiful green silk, you can see there are some of the family portraits. So above the fireplace is Francis Child the Younger. And he was the man who commissioned Adam to do the exterior. And then you can't quite see him in the far corner, a lovely portrait of Robert Child. And then again, in the same size, is Mrs. Child, his wife Sarah, and they're the ones that commissioned for the interior. And this room is just, it's green, glittering gold. Everything is gilded. It is absolutely beautiful. There are 2 huge mirrors as well that shed the light round the room, and this would have been an evening room. It's one of our challenges to light because it's on the south side of the house, so it gets dark during the day, but of course it's meant to be seen at night. So one day we will light it with candlelight and it will look amazing.
Brilliant, Judith. I think that's the size of the house, isn't it? I think we're done.
Yes.
Great. Well, as Judith kindly said, we've had an incredible collection gifted to the National Trust and placed at Osterley. It's the Ford collection, and the Ford collection came to Osterley last year, and I am just going to look at a few of the works that we looked at, and using Indigo's toolkit. And I think, just as Indigo said, you know, this is something that we've really just starting out. So we're really open to people, you know, sending us feedback about this, you know, gathering as much research as we can, so we can start seeing about how we can share it further. We put on a display last year, working with colleagues across the trust, including Alice Ronnitz-Watson and Amy Orrick, who might be on the call this morning. But that was really a huge collaborative endeavour, in which we wanted to really broaden the narrative about these amazing paintings that have come to Osterley, because, as Judith alluded to, when it came to the trust, the picture collections went with Lord Jersey over to Jersey. So we work on actually trying to present the house with this amazing collection now at Osterley. And really, I'm just going to highlight some of the key works in the collection that have queer histories. And I think most prominently is this incredible work by Thomas Patch, A Gathering of the Dilettante Around the Medici Venus. And we can see Thomas Patch, he's right in the centre of this painting, wearing the sailor's outfit that he was renowned for wearing, and he's really surrounded by all these gentlemen. I think there are 19 in total, with a little black and white dog on the checkered floor. And then there are 6 up on the 2 balconies. And Devon-born Thomas Patch is really best known for his caricatures of British grand tourists amid the antiquities of Italy. And we can see 5, this is an imagined gallery space, but 5 prestigious sculptures from the Uffizi collection in Florence are arranged. And at centre is the Venus de Medici. And in the niches behind it are the dancing faun on the right and Mercury on the left. And then to the left, as we're looking at it, the wrestlers, in which are gathered around all these gentlemen in these incredible outfits. And I really, just to reiterate, that a PowerPoint cannot do justice to the colours that are in this work. They really are. The textures of the velvets and the silks that they're wearing are really incredible. That variety of colourful suits and their wigs and their hats. And there's been a lot of work to try and identify some of the men that are portrayed in this portrait. And I know Alice Watson, one of my colleagues, has done a lot of work on that to try and identify them. So we've got Patch at centre. And then to the left of him, he's really being directed by his friend, the diplomat and Florentine resident, Sir Horace Mann, in a kind of more brightly coloured outfit. And then just some details of this work. So you can see how Patch is measuring between the Venus's nose and her wrist with the implement. And then, like I said, lots of these are caricatures of the men that Patch knew. So we've got Earl Cowper, who's dressed in blue, and he's given on the right-hand side a very prominent chin by Patch. And so as one of the identified men in the portrait, last year we really drew on how lots of these men were in Italy, arriving as grand tourists, and people like Cowper was staying in Italy for the rest of their lives. And he's best known really as a collector of art, but he was also an important patron of science and music. He acted as an agent to the Italian opera in London and also promoted the music of Handel in Italy, which were often performed at his villa in Florence. And this slide just gives you kind of a few more details of the men that Patch has portrayed in the work. And Patch was a Devon-born painter, as I said, but he was also a man of many talents. He was also an art dealer. And he's really best known today for his genre scenes of 18th century life in Italy, particularly in Florence and Rome. And I think, as this work demonstrates, he had a deep appreciation for classical antiquity, particularly Greco-Roman sculpture, in which were featured idealized male forms. And though he's not widely recognised in mainstream queer histories, recent scholarship and queer readings of his work suggests Patch's life and art are ripe for exploration through a queer historical lens. We know that he was expelled from Rome in 1755 under unclear circumstances, though contemporary reports and scholarly speculation strongly suggest it was due to homosexual behaviour. At the time, sodomy, although it was not only criminalised, but could lead to severe social and legal consequences. And we know that after his expulsion, he settled in Florence, where he painted this incredible work, and Florence was somewhat more tolerant. His exile may also have forced him into an exile which placed him within a network of other expatriates, artists, and collectors who shared or tolerated queer identities. And by portraying these social scenes featuring grand tourists, we can see many of these Englishmen were exploring classical art. But he's also portraying them with subtle satire. And I think all of this is going to be explored in much greater detail by the Lewis Walpole Library. We had one of the colleagues from Yale over earlier this year, which is an exhibition opening in September 2025. And it's going to explore aspects of Patch's life, art, and associations with the British community of diplomats, tourists, artists, and collectors in Italy. So really, as our work kind of starts at pace, lots of other institutions are obviously looking at his work in much greater detail. And the next work I just really wanted to highlight, which is actually on view at the moment at Osterley, if you come to Osterley, it's in the South Corridor, is this incredible painting by Pompeo Bertoni of Humphrey Morris. And it's really a very imaginative grand tour portrait. The first of Bertoni, in which he usually depicted his sitters upright, but here he's really taken the horizontal format with Morris seated with his whippets at his side. Bertoni was an Italian painter renowned for his portraits and mythological works, particularly during the 18th century in Rome. Initially celebrated for his mythological and religious paintings, Bertoni gained prominence as the leading portraitist in Rome by the 1750s, and there are works by him across our National Trust holdings. His portraits often depicted British aristocrats on their grand tour, showing them, as he shows this gentleman here, in classical settings with ancient ruins or statues in the background. And he poses Humphrey Morris, who was a Cornish member of Parliament, near the Vatican Gardens in Rome, relaxing after an afternoon of shooting game and birds. And as our interpretation really highlighted last year, and particularly Osterley held Middlesex Pride in July, where I did a couple of curator talks, and we spoke about how 2 years before Bertoni painted him, Morris was the victim of one of a number of blackmailing gangs who specifically targeted gay men for the purpose of extortion. Morris was resourced enough to mount a court case, which he won, but his health, already fragile, was severely impacted, and he left soon after for Italy, never to return. So I think there's just so much more work that we can do on this, and whether we can, not just only by having written interpretation, but something that we've spoken about with Matt, having tours of the collection which really look at them through a queer lens. And obviously, we don't hold all the information about lots of our works in our collection, but there's a fantastic article that Indigo has written, which is on Art UK, which really looks at both of the paintings that I'm showing here. The one on the left, which is actually at Osterley, and the one on the right, both of the Byers family, which is in the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. And Indigo's article, it was published in February of this year and entitled 18th Century Queer Scottish Lives, Eliza Fraser and James Byers. And James Byers came from an Aberdeenshire Jacobite family. They'd left Scotland after the failure of the 1745 Rising, and he was educated in France. He was in Rome by 1758, and he trained as a painter and then as an architect. But he also established himself, and I think this is what both these paintings beautifully kind of look at, is him as a leading art dealer and a professional tour guide. The portrait on the left shows his mother, Janet Moore, and I love how she's portrayed in both of these paintings, not only in the credible fashion that she's wearing, but also her lapdogs kind of around her, all three of them in both of the works. And on the image on the left, James Byers is depicted in a grey coat and mustard waistcoat, and he stands kind of behind his mother. He's obviously the matriarch of the family, whilst he talks with his sister Isabella, Mrs. Robert Sandilands, who's shown here in half mourning dress. And then to the right, in a red suit, is Byers's business partner, the engraver Christopher Norton. And you can see that they're gathered in front of fluted columns and green and red drapery, which are pulled back to show a view of the St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And the Polish-Lithuanian artist was a close associate of Byers, who, amongst other things, provided archaeological drawings for his partner, Christopher Norton. The portrait on the right, which is now in the Scottish National Portrait Gallery, as I said, is really spoken about in great detail by Indigo. And she writes about how James Byers, for James Byers, the Grand Tour offered more than just an education in art and antiquities. It also served as a playground for homosocial relationships, in which James Byers and his long-term partner, Christopher Norton, explored and expressed their individuality and sexuality through their social networks. And in the image on the right, which is set within an interior scene, very prominently in the middle, just behind Byers's left shoulder, is a prominent relief of Ganymede and Zeus in the form of an eagle. And really the scene recalls the myth of Ganymede, a mortal man who Zeus abducted as a lover. So definitely read that article. I'm really looking forward to coming to Indigo's talk as well online. And then the last slide, because I realise we haven't got much time, I just really wanted to highlight was Judith spoke about Osterley coming to the Trust, but that 20th century history at Osterley is obviously a really incredibly interesting period. And so I just really wanted to highlight Oliver Messel and the amazing ball that was held there in July 1939, hosted by the Earl and Countess of Jersey, who you can see on the right-hand slide. They hosted their own Georgian ball and fete Champetre at Osterley, in which guests dressed in 18th century costume as a tribute to the Romantic period in which the house was built. The executive committee for the ball included designers Oliver Messel and Felix Harbord, which was under the patronage of Queen Mary. And the ball attracted a very glamorous crowd. And there were fantastic press descriptions about the ball. And I just wanted to, because these are black and white photographs, really just give you a colour description of the ball. In which was written, in the white and scarlet tent, designed by Oliver Messel, the company danced, countesses and peers, film stars and socialites, architects and Mr. Osbert Lancaster. The band peeped from a frame of bamboo and wreathed ivy. Lights were concealed in sheaves of corn. Corner pedestals were crowned with plaster horse heads, their purple manes tied with green ribbons. So I hope that gives some kind of colourful description about what Oliver Messel created at Osterley. And the ball poster is on the left-hand side. And Oliver Messel was a leading theatre designer from the early 1930s to the mid-1950s. And he really won international acclaim for his lavish, painterly and poetic designs informed by different period styles. I mean, he was amazingly influential, working across ballet, drama, film, musicals, and opera. And the ball gave him fantastic scope. They had a fireworks display above the lake. There are musicians dressed in Venetian outfits whilst they played Handel's water music from a raft. What we do still hold in the collection at Osterley is Lord Jersey, who you can see on the right-hand side with his wife. And Judith showed a colour image of it in the drawing room, but there he is below the Alan Ramsay portrait of his relation. And he's dressed in this incredible blue velvet suit, which we still hold at Osterley. And there are fantastic descriptions of other ball goers, including Oliver Messel's sister, the Countess of Ross, who gave Nyman's, another fantastic National Trust property in Sussex, to the National Trust. And she was reported to have sported blue hair, blue eyelashes, and blue eyelids. And Glyndebourne at the moment have a fantastic exhibition called Oliver Messel, Designer, Maker and Influencer. And I think there's going to also be an exhibition of his work at Nyman's. So just to say, this is obviously a huge collaborative effort, and we will be looking at working across the Trust and with external partners as well. But hopefully that just gives a little bit of scope about the fantastic collection at Osterley. And over to Matt.
Hello. Right. So, just checking that my audio is on, actually. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a bit about Well, how this all came about, really, with Indigo reaching out through, as she said, a cold call to the Osterley inbox. I was initially unsure how to respond. On the one hand, I knew that Osterley had started looking at the LGBTQ plus identities in its collection, particularly via, as Alice was pointing out, and Judith, the new paintings that had come to us via the Brinsley Fore collection last year, and the portrait of Humphrey Morris that we were just looking at. That was discussed also on a queer tour of the house for Middlesex Pride last year, which was hosted at Osterley, has been for the last couple of years. On the other, I'll be honest, I didn't personally think at the time that one or two paintings, the ones that I was aware of, was enough to go on for an LGBTQ plus toolkit launch at Osterley. I mean, to be honest, after listening to Alice this morning, how wrong I was. There are so many stories to uncover from the collection we have at Osterley. But a few months ago, I didn't really think of Osterley being a queer or LGBTQ plus informed house. I certainly wasn't aware of anyone outwardly gay having lived there. But Indigo was keen on Osterley as being a site where the toolkit could be used. And I decided to give the toolkit a go myself fairly recently, as someone who has some education in art history, but is certainly not an expert. I started off when looking at the toolkit, thinking about the entrance hall at Osterley. You can see a couple of statues on the screen that are part of the entrance hall. It's one of the rooms I've spent the most time in at Osterley in my previous role on the property as a welcome manager and volunteer manager for our house welcome volunteers. It reminds me, this room, as it's meant to, of an ancient Roman structure, something like a temple or basilica. But one part I always struggled to explain to visitors was the roundel of Sir Isaac Newton above the western door of the room. Visitors themselves have asked me several times, thinking that it's a bit odd, and why Isaac Newton. It seemed to not fit with the classical design of the room. But Newton, of course, points to the Enlightenment, a period of change to ways of thinking in the 18th century, alongside the reveling in ancient structures and art. I realised that Indigo's toolkit was well placed in historic houses like this one. It challenges us to reflect on our thinking, on how we assume narratives are heteronormative unless we look a little closer. The toolkit, then, in itself, feels very at home in the Enlightenment, in a period of scientific discovery, a period, simply put, where ways of thinking were challenged, including around our identity, our humanity, and being in the universe. When looking at Osterley through more of a queer lens, I found these photographs from a past Pride event at Osterley. I just found them helpful just as visual aids. The draping of a pride flag over Osterley's statues of Hercules and Apollo. We tend to think, at least I do, of Hercules being quite ultra-masculine. Wrestling lions, there's a lion skin in the sculpture, and a knotted club he's holding cements this picture in our thinking in that way. But the positioning of the pride flag reminds me of a roundel discussed in Indigo's toolkit for the Georgian house, an engraving of Jupiter disguised as Diana seducing the huntress Callisto. Indigo talks about this engraving as revealing the inherent queerness in classical mythology. Our anachronistic modern pride symbol reminds us, the modern viewer, of the queerness of ancient Greek culture. It doesn't invade the statue, it doesn't add something that isn't there, but is instead a modern prop that can take us beyond the knotted club and lion skin and emphasize another part of ancient Greek culture. The Cambridge Museum of Classical Archaeology points out that Greek historian Plutarch says that Hercules' list of lovers went beyond numbering, including many male lovers such as Jason, Adonis, or I always struggle with this name, Iolaus. Plutarch tells us that Iolaus in particular was honoured by many in antiquity for this love, and it was popular for lovers to make reciprocal vows of affection at his tomb. He says, "It would be a task too great to enumerate the amorous amours of Hercules, but among the rest, Iolaus is honoured and adored to this day by many, because he is thought to have been the darling of that hero. And upon his tomb it is that lovers plight their troths and make reciprocal vows of their affection." So people, I think, up until the 2nd century, still visiting the tomb to make their own vows of affection in a homo-romantic way. I think that's quite an incredible way of looking at the statue in our own collection afresh, thinking about these ancient Greek narratives. I do feel like the pride flag was draped there for a reason. There was clearly a sense that it belonged there in some way, that it did something to transform our immediate impression of the statue. I think I found that fairly easy, actually, a way of thinking about a statue that I've gone past numerous times at Osterley in a new way, thinking about it differently, and calling into question my own way of thinking about what it looks like in the Osterley collection. In a call with Indigo, prior to sort of my reflections on this, I said to her that I didn't think Osterley was or could be explicitly queer. Looking at the Georgian house and the work she had done there to bring out queer 18th century narratives, I thought it must be something unique to the Georgian house. But from my own small attempts to use the toolkit to start looking at Osterley's collection in a different way, I can say that I was wrong. That it's surprisingly easy to wander into Osterley, look around and rethink how we see its collection and the history that it inspires, both that of Robert Adams' time and the ancient world that so much of his architecture and creative thinking and the artists he brought back from the Grand Tour were involved in. I think thinking quite reflectively about myself as a gay man, part of my reticence to begin with was a sense of thinking that I don't think I really do belong here in terms of my sexuality at Osterley. I think many LGBTQ plus people do think that when they enter spaces. They think that they either don't belong or that there aren't any stories to do with their inherent identity. I felt like I didn't really want to look because I wondered what the point was. I would only be disappointed or feel silly. But like visitors exclaiming of Isaac Newton, "Why is he here?" I was presently surprised. I could see myself in the statue of Hercules, certainly not physically, I hasten to point out, but in terms of being a gay or bisexual man entering a historic house and daring to belong. And in terms of where we go next at Osterley, looking at Indigo's brilliant toolkit and the exploration that we've started at Osterley, the main bit of programming I would love to put in, perhaps even this year, would be working with one of our local LGBTQ plus community groups to establish a queer tour of the house. The group I have in mind already does queer walks and trails. So I think it would be great to look around the house with them and see what we can put together alongside some of the work we've already done, particularly some of those grand tour paintings like the Thomas Patch that Alice was sharing with us in this call. A big part of our work will involve talking to our house guides who already have a wealth of knowledge about the property and may have their own stories about the house and its collection that share a queer narrative in some form. Looking ahead to next year, it is, of course, the 300th anniversary of architect Robert Adams' birth, and it would be wonderful for an LGBTQ plus event in the house to be part of that, alongside other things such as an architectural tour. There's so much that we could do next year for that anniversary, including connecting with other Adam properties, such as the local Zion House down the road, that has in some ways a similar collection to ours. But yeah, it's been incredible coming on this journey with you all, with Indigo, and starting to look at Osterley's collection afresh through a different lens, and just walking into these spaces and seeing what we can discover about them, and trying to reveal queer history in different ways in the house.